Good morning. That's your homework that you did last night. I am curious. So your participation grade is going to be based on two questions. The first one is, how did you like using the Google Forms instead of stuff through Sycamore? Um, I kind of like it a lot better, but I want to see what your experience was, and you will enter your homework the same way again today, and we'll see how it goes this week. Your second part participation question will be later on in this video. Okay, so we're going to identify the percentage of each circle shaded in light gray, just so that we can refresh our memory. So if we look at the first one on the left, what portion of that circle is shaded in the light gray? You said 25%. You are correct. What about the next one? 50%. And then the third one, so 3/4, right, is shaded light gray, 75%. Next one's a little trickier, right? How much do you think is shaded there? 80%, right? It got really tricky because they didn't give us one of the lines in the 12, 3, 6, or 9 o'clock position. But if you look at it, you can kind of tell it's not quite as big as the 25%, or not quite as big as it's the black part that's left isn't quite as big as the 25%. That's what I'm trying to say. Sorry. All right. How about the last one? That looks like it's bigger than 25%. Not much, right? It's smaller than 50%. So it's 33%. And we wouldn't be able to get an exact number because we don't have enough information, but we know it's in between 25 and 50, and it's closer to 25% than 50%. Okay, mini lab. The table shows the results of a survey about which sport people prefer to watch. These data can be displayed in a circle graph. So this exercise is going to require a little bit of your imagination um, as we go through it. You're not required to, but if you want to actually do this exercise out with some paper and string, it might be a nice way for you to visualize what they're trying to show you. Step 1. For each category, let 1 centimeter equal 1%. On a piece of adding machine tape, mark the length in centimeters that represents each percent. Label each section. So what it means is you'd measure 4 centimeters, draw a line, type in auto racing for 4%. Do the same thing with baseball, 11 centimeters, write 11% in baseball, and then you would just do that continuously. Step 2. Tape the ends together to form a circle. Step 3. So I should have had that picture come up earlier, but all they did was they taped it together so that the um, what you wrote is on the inside, and then you're going to tape string from each line that you drew. And then if you notice what it did is it made like a life or made a pie chart, right? But a 3D one for you. So now let's make a bar graph of the data. There's our bar graph, and it's right next to our circle graph. Which graph represents the data better, a circle graph or a bar graph? And then explain. So the circle graph represents the data better, as you can see how much each category compares to the whole. So all they're saying is if you look at football, 43%, that's the bottom section of the circle, right? And that kind of gives you a better comparison versus the other ones. Circle graphs. Used to compare data that are parts of a whole. So there's our table again. And here's a circle graph of that same information from the mini lab. Number 4% for auto racing, 11% for baseball, and so on. So the interior of the circle represents a set of data. So all of this is our data, right? And it's inside the circle. The pie-shaped sections show the groups. So the pie-shaped sections are, this one's pointing to 12%, none. The other pie-shaped piece is 43% for football, and so on as we go around. And the percents add up to 100%. We won't have, when we add up all these percents, we get 100%. I don't know where I was going with that. And you can add up the table, the number percents in the table, and you'll get 100%. Scaffolding questions with a circle for some reason. All right, I want to divide the circle into 3 parts. One part should be twice as large as each of the 2 smaller equal parts. So it's going to be 3 parts. The 2 smaller parts are going to be the same size. And the larger part is going to be twice as big as the 2 smaller parts. Or, yeah. What is the first thing you would do to divide the circle? You can draw a line to divide the circle in half. We do that, and one of these 2 halves is going to remain whole and be the larger part. Does it matter where the line begins and ends? No. But the line must go through the center of the circle. So you could have started this line literally anywhere on this circle. As long as you go through the center, it's fine. What would you do next? Draw a line to divide 1/2 of the circle in half. That represents the 2 smaller equal parts. There you go. So this left side of the circle, I cut in half with that green line. What part of the circle does each of the smaller parts represent? 1/4, right? And what does the large portion represent? 1/2. You can use number sense to sketch the circle graphs. So the examples, we're going to sketch a circle graph. Transportation. The students at Adams Middle School were asked how they got to school in the morning. The results are shown at the right. Sketch a circle graph to display the data. So 54% by school bus, 27% walk, 9.5% bike, and 9.5% carpool. Before constructing a circle graph, check that the percents add up to 100%. So if I add 54 and 27, that's 81. And then if I just set that aside for a minute and I say, okay, 9.5 and 9.5 is 19. If I add 19 to 81, that gives me 100. So we are good. Write a fraction to estimate each percent. So 54% is roughly 50%, right? Slightly more. And 50% equals 50 over 100, or 1/2. And we're going to come back to that in a couple minutes. 27%, we can estimate around 25%. And that's 25 over 100, or 1/4 of the circle graph. And then 9.5 is roughly 10. And 10% equals 10 over 100, or 1/10. So use a compass to draw a circle with at least 1 inch diameter. So I just went straight ahead and pulled this graph out of your book. And now we'll just kind of break down. Since 54% is a little more than 50%, or 1/2, shade a little more than 1/2 for school bus. So the yellow area is the school bus. Notice that's not a straight line cutting that graph right in half. It takes a little turn to represent that it's bigger than 50%. And then the same thing for 27% for walk. That green area for walk, notice they did the straight edge, like up and down, for the where walk and school bus go together. That just makes it easier to determine. And then the line on the bottom right is a little bit further than it would have been for 25%. And then since the two remaining ones are equal, you can just split what's left there in half and label each of those. A circle graph is a good way to show how 100% of the population is divided into parts. To sketch a circle graph, percents can be converted into fractions and simplified. The resulting fractions can be compared to estimate the size of each part of the graph. Check your progress. The table shows how people responded to a question about the importance of sunny weather in a vacation location. Sketch a circle graph to display the data. So we have very important 45%, important 30%, not very important 15%, and not at all important 10%. So if we sketch it out, we can say, okay, very important 45%, that's slightly less than half. So notice that it's not a straight line across, goes halfway straight and then cuts, right? Important 30%, notice that's slightly bigger than the 25%. Also notice that in this case, if we add up 45 and 30, those two, that's 75%. Notice that those two together looks just like a 75% one, right? So that's another way that you can help yourself with the trying to just figure out how much to measure out. And then not very important is 15%, so it's going to be a little bit more than the 10% portion of what was left. Examples: analyze circle graphs. Popcorn. Sandy surveyed her class to see which flavor of popcorn they like the best. The circle graph shows the results of her survey. So this is going to be mostly what your homework is analyzing graphs. I'm not going to have you create any. So just make sure you understand this. If you understand this, you can understand how to make them. Which flavor of popcorn did the students like the most? So if we look at it, the largest section of the graph is the butter, which makes sense because it is the best. And which two sections represent the flavors chosen least often? So if we look at the graph, which do you think it's going to be? So cheddar and nacho were chosen the least often, right? Nacho's only 5%, cheddar's only 9%. Hopefully that jumped out at you. Which three sections altogether make up about the same percent as butter flavored popcorn? So that gets a little tough, right? A little trial and error. So if we go with white cheddar is 14 plus caramel is 17, so that's 31. And then plain is 12. Would that give us 43? So we do cheddar, caramel, and plain. White cheddar, caramel, and plain. That's right, because there's another cheddar. So that's what we said, right? Check your progress. So we're going to analyze another circle graph, and this one shows items that fill landfills in the United States. We are a very wasteful society of people. Which item is found most in U.S. landfills? So if we're looking at this, the largest one is paper. And which item or items is found the least in U.S. landfills? So the smallest percentage appears to be rubber and leather at 6%. And which two sections represent items that are found about the same amounts in U.S. landfills? So if we look around, we have a couple we could choose from, right? We have metal and food and yard waste are 3% apart. And then there's plastics and other trash that are 3% apart. So I think you could have chose either one. How does the amount of food and yard waste compare to the amount of rubber and leather in U.S. landfills? So food and yard waste, 11%, and rubber and leather is 6%. So food and yard waste is about twice as much as the rubber and leather. Additional examples. Entertainment. The table shows how many hours a group of teenagers spent playing video games in 1 week. So there's our number of hours, and that's a percent for each one of those responses. We're going to make a circle graph to display the data. Remember to label each section of the graph and make a graph title. So here's our graph title so that everybody knows what it is, right? Time spent playing video games. And if we look at 0 to 1 hours, 35%. So that is somewhere between 25% and 50% of the graph. And then 1 to 2 hours is 10%. That looks about right, right? That's less, probably a little less than half of 25% of the graph. And then 2 to 3 hours, that looks about roughly 25% of the graph. And then 3 or more hours is 30%, which would appear to be a little more than 25% of the graph. So for additional examples 2 through 4, use a circle graph that shows the method of transportation students use to get to Martin Luther King Jr. Middle School. So there's our circle graph. All the information we need should be right there. Which method of transportation do most students use? So I'm going to go over, I think the biggest part of this graph looks like it's the 36%, take the bus. And I don't see any section that looks bigger, and I don't see any number percent that is bigger. So it is bus. Which two methods of transportation are used by the least amount of students? So walking and riding the moped, right? 7 and 14% are the two smallest groups. How does the number of students who ride mopeds compare to the number of students who take the bus? About 5 times the number of students that ride mopeds ride the bus, right? 7 times 5 is 35, and it's 36. So that is roughly almost, not quite, but almost exactly 5 times. And here's your homework for tonight. Head on over to Google Classroom to submit it. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in class.